Welcome, folks. Today we're diving into the striking parallels between two historical figures who brought back vengeance and ideology to economic policy. It's quite the
Yeah,
roller coaster ride through history and economics.
absolutely. The juxtaposition of Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump is fascinating. Both, after being voted out, made a triumphant, or perhaps stubborn, comeback with a clear ideological vision.
Right. And that's what grabs your attention, the fact that in nearly 250 years of American history, only Cleveland and Trump have managed to return to power after a defeat. Both came back, saying, "I was wronged," and determined to undo their predecessors' actions, even though it turned out disastrously for the economy.
Yeah, exactly. And what strikes me is the sheer ideological rigidity they both exhibited. Cleveland, for example, decided tariffs were inherently corrupt, a tool of the wealthy. He was so fixated on cutting them drastically that he overlooked their role as a revenue stream and protective measure for American industries.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he was so blinded by his beliefs that he neglected the fact that those tariffs actually kept the economy stable for a while. When
Yep,
Cleveland gutted
absolutely.
tariffs, instead of opening up the economy, well, it just collapsed. The Panic of 1893 hit, and sure enough, you had like railroads bankrupting, banks failing all over the place, and unemployment shooting high.
Mm-hmm. And let's not forget, foreign investors panicked and pulled their gold out. The gold standard tightened, creating a vicious cycle of economic downfall. It's almost a perfect storm, right?
Right on. Cleveland's refusal to adapt his policies and his reliance instead on private bailouts from Wall Street bankers like J.P. Morgan only worsened the situation. He vetoed emergency aid and essentially told people to tough it out.
Yeah, it's almost like he was more committed to proving an ideological point than actually, helping the people. Exactly. And that nonchalant disregard ended up, well, leaving a wake of economic devastation in its path. Fast forward to the present day, and we see a strikingly similar pattern with Trump's tariff policies. Instead of cutting tariffs like Cleveland, Trump wants to lock them in as a blanket measure.
Right. Trump's strategy with tariffs, first imposed on China, then extended across the board, is eerily reminiscent of ideological stubbornness. He claims that these tariffs will restore American manufacturing, but the reality is it's causing farmers to need bailouts, raising steel and aluminum prices and inflating costs for everyone.
And according to reports, it's costing American households over $1,300 a year due to higher prices. When you think about it, the economic principles at work seem very similar.
Yeah, and that's the kicker. Both leaders, Cleveland and Trump, are driven by ideology rather than a balanced, adaptable economic strategy. Cleveland went for tariff cuts to fight perceived elite corruption, but he ignored that tariffs also protected
Right.
American industry and provided federal revenue. And Trump's tariffs, on the other hand, are about domination, as if stacking them up is a magic solution.
Mm-hmm. It's like they're both playing with economic fire. One type of fire too hot for the system to handle.
Exactly. What's even more chilling is when you look at the consequences. Cleveland's policies led to the collapse of the economy. Over 15,000 businesses closed, and unemployment hit above 18%. And his ideological inflexibility cost his party dearly. The Democrats weren't seen as representatives of the working class for nearly 2 decades.
Yeah, that's a staggering fallout. And Trump's moves now, pushing a 10% universal tariff on all imports, from medicine to fuel, are sending global markets into a tizzy. The US dollar is weakening, inflation is brewing, and it's hitting everyone, particularly those who can least afford it.
Right. And the irony is palpable. Both leaders believed their way was the only way, refusing to bend or adjust as warning signs blared. It's not just about economic policy. It's a demonstration of economic delusion wrapped in ideology and arguably personal vengeance.
Totally. Now, I do wonder though, don't you think that in the modern globalized economy, the stakes are even higher for such missteps. Back then, Cleveland's actions had dire consequences nationally. But now, with digital currencies and complex global supply chains, every bad decision sends ripples well beyond our borders.
Absolutely, and that's a critical point. The economy is global now, and when a policy like universal tariffs is introduced, it creates a domino effect. It not only destabilizes domestic markets but also affects international trade and investor confidence, which, in turn, further weakens the currency and drives up the cost of living.
Yep, it's the modern equivalent of opening Pandora's box. And here's where I must respectfully challenge something. While both leaders were driven by ideology, I think there's a slight nuance. Some argue that Trump's tariffs were meant to protect American jobs in manufacturing. Do you think there's any merit to that argument despite the overall negative impact?
That's a fair point. I mean, on paper, tariffs can be justified as a measure to shield domestic industries from foreign competition. But in both cases, Cleveland's and Trump's, the economic fallout tells a different story. The
Absolutely.
idea that you can impose such sweeping measures without considering the unintended consequences is, well, perilous. It's like trying to put a Band-Aid on a deep wound.
Right, and pushing policies solely based on ideology, without adapting to economic realities, inevitably leads to disaster. In Cleveland's case, it tore apart his own party's voter base, and with Trump, we're already seeing a weakening dollar and higher consumer prices.
Exactly. And it's like, both of them ended up punishing the very people they claimed to be saving. Cleveland's working-class supporters suffered when his policies led to business closures and soaring unemployment, and Trump's policies are raising costs for everyday Americans.
Yeah, that's spot on. And it begs the existential question. What do we, as a nation, do differently? History has already penned this narrative, and if we, don't adjust our approach, we might be forced to endure another round of economic fallout.
Precisely. And that's the ultimate takeaway. These stories, though separated by over a century, serve as a cautionary tale. They remind us that when leaders are blinded by personal agenda or ideology, economic policies can turn catastrophic. And the cost is not just in numbers, it's in the lives of everyday people.
Exactly. It makes me wonder, do you see any realistic path forward that avoids these pitfalls? Especially when, nationalist sentiments are on the rise and leaders seem more inclined to take rigid stances rather than pragmatic ones?
That's the million-dollar question. I think the answer lies in economic flexibility and listening to the warnings of experts. It's like if you're steering a massive ship, you don't want to ignore the iceberg warnings just because you're fixed on your course.
Absolutely, exactly.
You need to have checks, adaptability, and a genuine commitment to the well-being of the people.
And it also highlights the importance of accountability. If the fallout of such actions can destroy a political legacy, as it did for Cleveland, then maybe the modern electorate will eventually voice their discontent before it's too late.
You're right. If voters and the economic establishment react early enough, they might steer policies towards sustainable reforms instead of rigid ideologies. But the danger remains when leaders attribute failure to external scapegoats, immigrants, the media, the opposing party, instead of revising their flawed strategies.
And that, in a way, is the most dangerous part of this entire saga. When you refuse to adapt and then blame everyone but yourself, you're setting up a cycle where the same mistakes keep repeating.
Correct. It's a cycle of economic delusion, wrapped in veneer of strength and vengeance. The message here is clear. If we don't learn from the mistakes of the past, like those of Cleveland, and remain open to change, Trump's second term might, unfortunately, be a blueprint for repeating history with even higher stakes.
Yeah, very true. It's like history is echoing back to us, screaming, "Do better!" And honestly, the consequences of ignoring that echo in today's interconnected world are too dire to risk.
Exactly. So the real question that remains is, what will we do differently this time? The stakes are exponential now, with global markets and digital money in play. It's not just about domestic policy, it's about our place in the modern economy and the survival of the people.
Really, really important. As we wrap up, it's crucial to remember that economic policy isn't just a set of numbers. It affects lives. When ideology trumps pragmatic strategy, everybody pays the price.
Absolutely. And the historical parallels here serve as a stark warning. Clinging to an inflexible ideology in the face of economic facts leads to disaster. Let's hope that by understanding these lessons, both policymakers and the public can push for a more thoughtful approach
Exactly,
going
let's
forward.
hope for that. Thanks for this engaging discussion. It really sheds light on the importance of adaptability in policy.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to dig into history and economics together. And to everyone listening, remember, learning from the past is our best hope for a better future.